Hello, BookTube. All right, we're on part 2 of our November 2021 Q&A, and we are at Edward Gibbon. Thought I was done with Edward Gibbon asking me questions, but he is back to ask me questions. In your William Hazlitt Daily Penguin last year, you said that, quote, if one were to make a tiny rowboat of all the best English prose stylists, Hazlitt would be on that rowboat. Who else would you put on that rowboat, Steve? Thank you for all that you do. You and Frida never fail to brighten my day. Well, much as I hate to begrudge it to you, you little twerp, you, Mr. Gibbon, would be on that list. Absolutely, you would be. Also, Virginia Woolf, uh, uh, Cyril Connolly, a prince of my own profession, Rebecca West. It'd be a crowded rowboat. Let's put it that way. DDB says 2 questions, 1 personal and 1 book related. Number 1, you appear to have lived all over the place. Apart from Boston, do you have another favorite city in the USA? Well, they'd be past versions of cities. I imagine they'd be unrecognizable to me now. Keokuk, Iowa, for instance, or Austin, Texas. But I don't know that I'd recognize them, so I'm not sure that it would be fair. And number 2, excluding The Right Stuff, I'm guessing it might be a favorite. It is. Can you recommend another favorite space nonfiction book about the U.S. space program? Thank you for a constant service to BookTube. What are all these thank yous for? I assure you, I am getting more than I am giving. And I do have a recommendation, Moonbound, by Jonathan Fetter-Vorm. I might have it nearby here. We've seen it on this channel. It's a graphic novel, but it's really, really good. It's really good. Really involving. I would recommend Moonbound. Let's see here. Naute18 says, Dear Steve, thank you so much for all you do for us on BookTube. Again with this note. I assure you, you're doing more for me than I am for you. I appreciate the note, but I'm having a blast. Really appreciate that while you are an atheist, you still take the Bible and Christian theology and history seriously. That is my own approach as well. Do you know any parts of Scripture off by heart? It's just possible that I do. Do you have particularly favorite biblical passages or books that you return to again and again? First and Second Samuel's, First and Second Kings, First and Second Chronicles. They are endless for me. Finally, what is your go-to translation of the Bible in English? If it is the answer to that is okay. I'm going to paraphrase here. If my answer is the King James Bible, could I recommend a more readable translation? And I can recommend the New International Version. Lots of good first-rate scholars put that thing together, and it doesn't have the flair of the King James, but a lot of times people find the flair of the King James a little off-putting. This is a perfect alternative. The New International is available in a million different editions. Try and get one that has not been Bowdlerized on its own. Let's see here. Doom Antidote says, I hate to do this, but I can't help myself. Have you ever read? What Doom Antidote is referring to here is my lifelong mystification with people starting off a sentence to me with, have you ever read? I have been reading for a very, very long time at an enormously ground-covering speed. Just start your question some other way. but Doom Antidote is risking all by asking, have you ever read any of Statius's epic poems? Cue disdainful eyebrow rise. Have I ever... Okay. Let's clarify this for future Q&As. The literature of ancient Greece and Rome is static. There aren't any more ancient Greeks or ancient Romans. The literature of the ancient Greeks and the ancient Romans is static. There is only so much of it. And I have read it all. So you don't need to ask. If you're asking about an author of the ancient Greek or Roman world and you're wondering if I've read them, I have. I have read them. It is possible to read all of that work, and I have. I've come to the end of reading Purgatorio in the Divine Comedy and tried to find a widely printed translation of the Thebaid, but could not find one. Why do you think he's become lesser known / translated in modern times? Well, I have no idea. I'm assuming because classical education has gone in modern times. But Oxford World Classics did a mass market paperback of the Thebaid. I'm sure they did. I'm sure I remember that. They did when that would have been 25, 30 years ago. I'm sure that copies of that still exist. Am I imagining that? No, I'm sure that I saw that. I'm sure that they did the Thebaid. Anyway, Julie Alvar says, congratulations on your weekly book columns. Yes, thank you. I write my columns on the weekend. I was wondering if you have a cache of columns on hand just in case something comes up, like illness or whatever, and you can't write that weekend. Illness? At my age? At 28, I'm indestructible. Omnipotent Poobah says, congratulations once again on staying below 12K. Keep up the good work. Yes, thank you. It's difficult. Questions. Number 1, I see that the annual Boston Book Fair is this week. Will you be going, and how does it compare to the annual New York and LA fairs? I've never been to the LA fair, but I won't be going. Why on earth would I go to a book fair? Why would I do that? The Brattle Bookshop. Isn't most of the Boston Book Fair virtual this year? Just like it was last year? I think most of it is virtual, isn't it? Either way, why would I go? to chat with a whole bunch of book dealers that I see every week at the Brattle anyway? to buy a collectible book? No, there's no reason for me to go. And it would mean leaving Frida, just gratuitously leaving Frida. Or not an errand that's important or mandatory, but something just on a whim. I don't do that anymore. Number 2, Wilbur Smith died over the weekend. I had not realized how prolific he was until reading the obituaries. Given 140 million sales is his legacy, only Dad's books for boomers or something stronger. If I'm interpreting that fragment correctly, he was a best-selling adventure author. He's not a particularly good author, but he writes very enjoyable books. You think of when I say he's not a particularly good author, I'm not saying that because he was a best-selling adventure author. There are plenty of best-selling adventure authors who are really good. James Clavell is a perfect example of someone who's sold at least that many copies and is also very good to read. Wilbur Smith, not so much, especially later. I mean, he kept writing right to the end, and he kept writing a good solid 25 years after he had any kind of ability to do that, so he needed extensive help from his editors and from co-writers, acknowledged and otherwise. But his earlier books, those earlier Dad-style thrillers, are very good examples of Dad-style Clive Cussler thrillers. They're very good examples of that. Clive Cussler would be another example of something like that, where I don't think even his foremost fans would claim that there was any literary merit there, but they are as enjoyable as hell. And so is Wilbur Smith. I don't think up until probably his 3rd or 4th Ancient Egypt book, I don't think he ever wrote a book that wasn't really enjoyable, as long as you know what you're getting into when you go in. Right? You're going to get lots and lots of only slightly buried hoorah nationalism. You're going to get a good deal of, I would argue, unconscious and undidactic sexism. So not that Wilbur Smith was a creep, just that he was living and breathing and imbibing the atmosphere in which he wrote. You're going to get some of those things, but they'll still be worth your time. Those earlier books will still be worth your time. I keep banging this against this. That's not good. It's not good for the read-along. I don't know how to stop myself. Let's see here. Well, those are all your questions. Yes, they were. Okay. Birdie and Poppet ask, on your recommendation, I recently read and enjoyed The Bookshop by Penelope Fitzgerald. Do you also recommend her other work? I do. Although I don't know that you're going to find one as good as The Bookshop. If you read some of the others, and you find that one or even a couple of them are better than The Bookshop, I'd love to hear which ones they are. Which ones got that distinction? Let's see here. Oh, goodness. What happened? Oh, no. My iPad lost its place. Oh, goodness. All right. Well, I'll just make with snappy patter until we get back to where we were. We're only just starting here. Yes. Okay. There we go. Okay. Sakari Haponen. What's distracting me is that I keep banging against this thing, and I don't know how to stop that. Let's move this there. Will that work? That might work, although it introduces the sun. Oh, no, my arch enemy, the sun. Sakari Haponen says, what's your opinion on flash fiction? Have you encountered any good flash fiction with substance? It's not possible to have substance in a page. Do you think it's possible to craft good storytelling with let's say, 1,000 to 2,000 words? Feel free to ramble. My views are conflicted on the matter, and I want to know what you think. Greetings from Finland. I think it's mostly self-indulgent garbage. It is yet another concession being made to a steadily widening demographic group that cannot pay attention to anything longer than a tweet. I know that flash fiction has a longer heritage than that, but that heritage is still deeply, deeply rooted in unbelievable genetic level laziness. It is not possible to create an involving story in 1,000 words. any more than it's possible to tell an involving story over by a fireside in 2 minutes. It's not possible to do. All it is authorial self-indulgence. Let's see. Delir B has a barrage of questions. Hi, Steve. Nothing now can save you from the impending 12K. The Brave 300 can save me. Number one, how do you think MFA programs have affected American literature in general? Positive, negative, or neutral impact? It was a kind of neutral impact for years and years in that it produced a sameness, which is a neutral because some of the stuff done in that sameness was good. Now it's entirely negative because MFA programs all over the country have become hothouse flower greenhouses designed to cosset and reassure their participants, rather than to do any of the vetting or the workshopping that they used to be their assumed natural function. They don't do any of that anymore. Instead, it's constant identitarian politics reassurance. Everything you do is already great. You're already perfect. You're already perfect. You already know everything that you need to know. I cannot stand here and tell you that your lived experience is really crappy in its use of pronouns. I cannot do that. Oh no, I can't do that. That would be cultural imperialism of the worst kind. No, whatever you do is already perfect. And some of the more influential of those MFA programs then use their contacts to get those books in front of agents and then publishers. With the result that you see contemporary fiction getting worse and worse. It's exclusively autofiction now, and it's worse and worse. I read contemporary autofiction now, literary fiction. They're identical, so I don't know why I use two different terms, but I'll read an example. I'll find grotesque, orthographical mistakes that everyone along the line knows is there. It's just considered racist to point them out, I guess, or sexist to point them out, or transphobic to point them out. If you have an MFA program where the inmates are running the asylum, where the students are saying, well, I'm paying a lot of money here, I'm not paying that to hear you tell me anything I do is wrong, then the system, any import any value that it might ever have had has been not only erased, but reversed. So now it's an entirely negative impact. Number two, thoughts on Rulfo's Pedro Paramo. I've only read a part of it. I've never read the whole thing in either English or the original. Number three, when you get your first book published, who would you dedicate it to? I don't know. I'll dedicate it to my friend Deb if I can make it a posthumous dedication, but that doesn't seem like it's going to happen, does it? Fate's had several whacks at her and she's still maundering on. Number four, what is the reason that so much of popular booktube is content-free, as you put it? It seems as if neither the creators nor the viewers on the fairy light side of booktube are particularly interested in reading. Vastly different from, for instance, the music or the film community on YouTube, who are actually enthusiastic about their subject. I might quibble with you a little on the film side of YouTube. I watch a lot of Movie Bros, probably 24 channels, and although some of their insights or their nitpicking are interesting to me, the one element I have never seen in any of those videos, must be 1 million hours that I've watched, the one element I have never seen in any of them is an actual visceral personal enjoyment of what they're doing. I don't get that at all. And I think it's easy to demonstrate that it's not there. You go to Jeremy Johns or whoever it is reviewing the latest Transformers spin-off movie. Do you think they care about such a thing? Do you think they're interested in it in any way? No, they're not. They're not. They have assistants to do the graphics and to do the edits and to do all that stuff. They don't do it themselves. They only chew people out, especially if the people are relatives of theirs. Maybe fire them, especially if the person being fired is a relative of theirs. But they've long since passed the point. They brag about it, where they don't do any of that stuff on their own. It's become a very tired looks to me like a very tired treadmill of, I will give this product of yours attention because you invited me to the screening. And maybe I got a bag of free swag in addition to that. I don't notice much visceral enjoyment. Maybe you can point me to movie channels that have that. Although I should point out, every time one of you has pointed me to a movie channel and said, no, I think this guy's the real thing, I see just the same thing. They're plugging their podcast, they're plugging their merch, they're plugging their bobbleheads, and they're clearly not interested in the movie they're reviewing. No, there's no unless at all. You know what real interest looks like. I defy you to watch a YouTube movie channel that shows you that. Instead, those channels just invite you to move the goalposts. on what you consider visual enjoyment and not, what you consider visual involvement or not. If you want an infallible yardstick for whether or not what you're watching is sincere in its enthusiasm for its subject matter, you need look no further than me on books. Okay? If you're watching a movie review guy and he doesn't sound about movies the way I sound about books, he is phoning it in for money. But anyway, what was the question underneath all of that? Oh, right. Why so much of the Fairylight side of BookTube is content free? I think there's a very simple reason, and it's market driven. It's because they've realized they can be extremely successful being content free. There's a huge audience out there that wants the appurtenances of books, but not the books themselves. There's a huge audience out there that wants to live what I've seen noxiously referred to on one of those Fairylight channels as the bookish lifestyle, but perfectly free to admit that they don't read. That they don't read at all, or that it's been, what was it that Jesse, the so-called reader, said in a video just a couple of years ago? He said he can't remember the last time he's finished a book. And I would be willing to bet, I'm sure that video has been taken down, but I'd be willing to bet that 95, 97% of the big, multiple thousand subscriber Fairylights, manic, over-caffeinated BookTube channels are made by people who don't read. And again, I would use the same metric that I use for Jack Edwards, the Demon Smurf, who has 2 BookTube channels. No matter whether it's Jack Edwards with his hair and his cute mouth and his snub nose, or whether it's anybody else that you suspect, watch a video or two and ask yourself a simple question. Can you picture that person reading? Can you picture that person sitting down and reading? Can you do it? In your wildest imagination, can you imagine them doing it? Then imagine the booktubers that you know are real, that you know are sincere. It's not going to take you more than 2 seconds to picture me on my fainting couch reading with one hand on the iPad while gently patting Frida with the other. It's not going to take you 2 seconds to picture that. And as well you should, because that is 90% of my time. When I'm not making these videos, that's what I'm doing. Same goes for any others. For any other sincere or genuine booktubers, you will easily be able to picture them reading. Easily. The ones on the other side of the divide, the ones with 70,000 subscribers and Fairylights and sponsors and embedded lying ads and whatnot, just ask yourself that question and go with your instincts. But that would be my answer to your question. They do it because it works, because it makes them thousands and thousands of dollars a month, because it works. Because there's a large audience out there that wants a friend who reads rather than to read themselves. They want the bookish world. Oh, that book gave me all the feels. Oh, I love so-and-so and their relationship with so-and-so, and I can prove that because I have the bobbleheads of both. Have you read the book? No. Oh, I have a lot of time. I'm really busy. Okay, have you read any books? So you read this YA fantasy novel, and you went onto your 117,000 subscriber BookTube channel and said it was the greatest thing in the world. Have you read any other fantasy? No. Have you read any other YA fantasy? No. Have you read any other YA? No. Have you read this book? Well, I'm sponsored by the publisher. Anyway, don't get me going. Let's move on to your last question. You said that the auteur directors generally mean trouble for you. Could you elaborate? Thoughts on some popular auteurs? Godard, Tarkovsky, Bergman, Lynch, the usual suspects. Yes, they usually cause problems for me because an auteur director will believe that their vision takes precedence over the enjoyment of the audience. And that's a violation to me. That's a vile, foul violation of the fundamental compact that exists between the maker of an art and the audience. An auteur director will say, and some of them have said, well, if they don't get it, they better learn to get it. They'll have to learn to like my movies, but I'm not going to change to what they like at all. And that gives me trouble. That gives me real trouble. And if some of you have fought back here, some of you movie snobs have fought back and said, well, no, that's not true. Auteur directors have a vision, and don't we want our artists to have visions? And besides, don't you love John Ford? I've had that a few times over the years. Don't you love John Ford? John Ford's artistic vision was to please his audience. Okay? If you could show me an auteur director whose artistic vision is to please their audience, I probably won't have a problem with them. I think it's... I could probably think of some, right? I could probably think of some auteur directors who do want to please their audiences. Uh, and that I wouldn't have a problem with. But you've listed the rogues gallery for me here. Let's see. Let's move on to Andrew Russell, who has a barrage of questions. That is the theme this time around. Number one, what is the thing that will most quickly put you off someone? Oh my, that's a whole list of things. I absolutely cannot stand condescension, as I've probably made clear on this channel. If somebody starts to talk to me like a child, if somebody just assumes, whether through their own insecurity or through their own inflated sense of self, that they can talk to other people like other people were either their employees or their children, well, I feel sorry for that person. Unless they try it to me. If they try it to me, I feel instant rage. So that would work. That doesn't happen often. I've found, totally unplanned, I've found that if you look older, if you have gray hair and you look older, people tend not to try that with you as much. But the obverse is also true. I can't, dealing with older people or younger people who act like older people, I can't stand it when I walk up to someone, when I talk to someone for a minute and realize that the portcullis is down. They're done in terms of growing or changing as a person, in terms of learning anything. They're done. They were maybe done a long, long time ago. And I'm just talking to, I don't even know, a homunculus, some sort of weird golem but they're not actively engaged in the world anymore. They know what they know what they like what they know, they don't like what they don't know, they don't want to know anything else, and they might be okay with not just telling you what they know, but they don't want to hear what you know. Something like that, where the gates are just down, that is off-putting, very much so. Question number 2. How long did it take you to build your prodigious reading pace? Was it over several weeks, months, years? Well, it's practice. A lot of it is practice. I read more than most people do. I devote my life to it. That's going to increase your speed no matter what. And number 3, assuming you have visited Glasgow, what did you like and dislike most about it? Well, it's going to sound like a cheesy answer, but I like the people. I went out a lot when I was in Glasgow. Went out a lot. And had lots and lots of adventures, drunken adventures. The entire time, every time that I have been to Glasgow, I have never, after 8 o'clock, there has never been any such thing as sober entertainment. Never. At any age, no matter what age the people I was with were. It's a very, or at least back then, it was a very hard drinking town. Which didn't always appeal to me, but it was the people, not anything else. Although when I was there a very long time ago. When I was there, there were certain areas of Glasgow that were little paradises for used bookshops. They're probably all gone by now. It's probably an investor's paradise like everything else. Geo Craftsman has a barrage of questions. Now, the first question is a have you read question. I'm not sure if that falls under what you refer to as book requests or not, but here it is. Number 1, the books that have made me become a reader a few years ago were the books of H. Rider Haggard, and particularly his Alan Quatermain series. Save for being in the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, he is often forgotten nowadays, aside from She and King Solomon's Mines. I think the other books he has written are underrated and stand out next to the other period adventure books like Natty Bumppo. Oh, don't mad? Are you mad? Have you read King Solomon's Mines? Oh, good Lord, this question just goes from bad to worse. First, you're saying that Rider Haggard is better than James Fenimore Cooper? That is simply not the case. I realize you have affection if he sparked your interest in reading, but that is simply not the case. And you're asking me if I've read King Solomon's Mines? You're asking me if I've read King Solomon's Mines? That's or any of the Alan Quatermain books, of course that was going to come. And what do you think of them? I like them very much. But they're fairly one-dimensional and wooden stuff compared to some of the stuff that Fenimore Cooper does in some of the Natty Bumppo stories. Not all of them, and a lot of the criticisms leveled against the Leatherstocking Tales by Mark Twain are correct. But I don't know, maybe it's just the nationalism coming out in me. But I think that the Natty Bumppo novels are better than you sound like you're giving them credit. You might want to go back to them. You might be pleasantly surprised. Number 2, you have said that you are not a book snob when it comes to editions or covers. But what about the inside? If you had the choice, would you typically favor editions that illustrate with illustrations or even facsimile editions over typical print editions? Facsimile editions can make a big difference in a book reading experience. My go-to example are fantasy novels written by William Morris. Well, okay, we might disagree on whether or not they can make a big difference in the reading experience. If you need if your book needs illustrations in order to improve the reading experience, that's not a very good book. But that having been said, I love a good illustrated edition. Absolutely, I firmly believe that print book publishers ought to go that route. There should be almost no books that have an original publication in multiple thousands of copies in hardcovers. The hardcovers should be for libraries and collectors, but they should never be in bookstores. Instead, a nice, heavy-duty, ornate trade paperback should go out in bookstores. And I think with the increased commerce, first of all, I believe that would increase book buying enormously in this country. And also the lower overhead, I think that would allow you to print some pretty nice illustrated editions of works. I'd love to see that happen. It's never going to. The publishing industry will die before it will do that. But I would like to see that. That would be great. Let's see here. Patrick O'Toole says, "Hey, Steve, loving the New World's November videos. Quick question. Do you ever get brain fog? Or perhaps daydream while reading? Or, heaven forbid, fall asleep while reading?" Fall asleep while reading? No. No. The answer is the resounding no to all three of those. No, I don't. No, I don't. Do you have any plausible reason why I do all of the above while sleeping way more than you? Well, I don't know you, Patrick. We don't Voxer. Don't think I haven't noticed. But my guess would be that you don't exercise at all. Literally at all. That you never exercise. And the point I would make is that if you're young and healthy, your body has evolved over 270,000 years to need exercise. It needs that as much as it needs vitamin C or vitamin D or water. It needs that as much as it needs anything else. And usually, if I don't know how old you are or anything like that or where you live, but usually the people who report brain fog is one thing. I don't know about that, but daydreaming, losing concentration, falling asleep at inopportune times, even though you sleep like the dead for 9 hours out of every 24. Those things, when people have reported them to me over the years, have usually come from somebody who not only doesn't take good care of themselves. Do you have hypercaffeinated, hypersugarnated soda of any kind? Coffee all day long? Good Lord. iPad has acted up again. The iPad's having brain fog. Oh, don't tell me it's frozen. We have lots of other questions to do. Well, anyway, let me continue with. So we were at Patrick O'Toole. Let's just start all this over again and see if it behaves itself. Usually, with people who reported those things to me, the reason was that they weren't taking care of themselves, even basic care of themselves, and that can make a big difference. That can make a big difference in your focus. So I would suggest that maybe that's the case. Feel free to email me on the subject. Let's see here. Anthony Ruger says, number one, he has a barrage of questions, of course. Everybody has a barrage of questions this time around. Number one, what do you think of Jeremy Black, the suspiciously prolific British professor and historian? Are any of his books worth getting? I've read probably 20 of them and not taken anything away from them at all. I'm not saying he's a worthless author. Probably there's somebody out there who thinks he's the greatest thing in the world, but I've never read a book of his where I thought there's anything here at all. And certainly I have no great impulse to read the ones I haven't read. Number two, will we be getting a review of Andrew Roberts' new biography for George III? Yes, you will. I wrote a review for the Christian Science Monitor. I think it's going to be online and in print, but I don't know when. No idea. I hope soon. The book is out now. I hope it's soon. Number three, is Stanley Ayling a biographer worth reading? Yes, very much so. Especially his book on Edmund Burke. Very good book on Edmund Burke. Not an easy person to write about. And number four, have you heard any rumors about the publication date of David Bromwich's second volume in his biography of Edmund Burke? No, I haven't. Let's see here. Trip says, I have a few random questions about Boston. What ways has Boston changed over the years for the better, other than the construction of the magnificent Boston City Hall? Boston City Hall is, of course, a giant pile of crap. It is an eyesore. It looks like a mistake. But other than that, Boston has changed a lot and gotten prettier and more livable. The Big Dig, a gigantic reconstruction project that took place about 10 years ago, maybe 20 years ago now, cost an arm and a leg. It ran over budget every year, but it worked. It worked to make Boston a lot nicer. There was an elevated highway that ran right through the city of Boston, and it was torn down and depressed below ground, and all of that space was filled in, a lot of it very nicely. That idea to take down those old 1970s eyesores of elevated roads and whatnot and put greenery in their place has taken place all over the city, just down the street from where I live. That was also true. That same thing also happened. A road that runs just near where I live used to be elevated for a long stretch right where I am, right by the Arboretum. And it was awful. I mean, the overhead was rusting and dripping. The underpasses were full of violent homeless people. And the city decided to tear that all down and broaden the road and cover the whole area with green space. And it worked. It worked really well. It works really, really well. So in that way, Boston has improved. The best improvement that Boston could do now would be to demolish Boston City Hall. And why does it seem like 99% of crime dramas are set in Boston? Well, I don't know that percentage is correct. But the appeal is not only that up until recently Boston was known as a very clannish and crime-ridden city, the Winter Hill Gang and Whitey Bulger and that sort of thing, but also Boston is a famously walkable city. It's got lots of enclaves, but it's a smaller area. So it feels more able to do in terms of local color, which is a big selling point for murder mysteries. Let's stop here and go on to part 3.